Hello there, this is Chris from MTG Artisan's Corner, and here is another Artisan deck I created around the card Cleric of Life's Bond from the set Zendikar Rising. I built Artisan decks because it's kind of my jam, and it's something I want to share with you all. For those who don't know, Artisan is the official term for playing with commons and uncommons, but no rares and no mythics. It's very much like Pauper, just with more wiggle room to flesh out some strategies. And we can give the deck a proper identity because we can actually play with most of the cards we get from a booster. So yeah, let's go to the deck tech. We have Cleric of Life's Bond, which is a worse and a kind of a better Ajani's Pridemate. I find it worse because it says here for the first time you gain life each turn, you put a 1/1 counter on it. Ajani's Pridemate says the same thing, but just without the first clause. So whenever you gain life, put a counter on it. However, the Pridemate does not gain life itself. It needs other cards to gain life. And the Cleric's Life Bond gains life on its own with other clerics. So I think they actually found a proper middle ground, let's say. The mana cost for this card is black-white. Ajani's Pridemate is just 1 and white. That's also something that brings the power level down of this card. Yeah. As general rule of thumb, you always want to load up on what a card is doing to give less variance, I'd say. And Cleric class is the second card in standard right now that does exactly that. So if you actually pay 4 mana and you gain life, you get to put a counter on a creature. And this card feels super weird. It's highly mana intensive. It doesn't synergize that well with the creatures on the board. So you're like needing three cards to get something out of this card, like 2 other cards. And that's super clunky sometimes. That's why there's only 3. The creatures that actually gain life in this deck are Lunar Veteran and Core Celebrant next to the Cleric himself. Lunar Veteran is pretty good because it not only gains life, it gets Disturb, which acts as card advantage. So if your opponent removes it, you just play it again. And you can still gain life on a different basis, but it still works out really well in this deck. Core Celebrant, also just simply another creature, gain 1 life, works really well because of the 4 toughness. This thing is a good blocker, has a huge butt, and therefore doesn't feel too bad when you play it. And 12 creatures round out half of the creature suite in this deck. And yeah, you need 12, so don't go lower than 4 of each here with this deck. Marauding Blight Priest is a pressure opponent. It's a support card. Whenever you gain life, your opponent loses 1 life. So if you gain 2, lose 1. If you gain 3, your opponent loses 1. It really doesn't matter. So you're always looking for small instances instead of big, huge chunks of life. And this card can go a long way. I've been able to win games off of this, and having 2 of them on the field really starts counting up. And again, adding up on the same effect, I've put Skemfar Shadow Sage in the deck because having 4 creatures on the field, or just even 3, and playing the Skemfar decreases opponents' life points by a huge margin, and it's exactly what we're looking for. This is the one that finishes. This is the card that finishes the opponent off. Especially if you can get it back with the Cleric class. You will have enough room to feel good bringing this creature back. I promise you. You'll see it in the games as well. Card advantage in this deck is Village Rites and Professor of Symbology. The sideboard is very, very simple. Get land, gain life. Removal, creatures with flying, which can be put counters on, and just a big removal spell that really needs to get of a nasty permanent. Village Rites should be viewed a bit differently, though. Yes, it draws cards, but you also have to sacrifice a creature, and that's something you should actually use to your advantage. So if there's a creature on the field that your opponent isn't killing and you want it in the grave in order to bring it back with the Cleric class, then Village Rites is the way to do it. You just sack it at the end step, it's in the grave, you draw 2 cards, which is a benefit, you take your turn, pay 5 mana, get the sacked creature back on the battlefield, and then hopefully win the game like that. That's actually the main reason the card is in the deck. For the removal suite, we have Bloodchief's Thirst. This is a card you really want to pay 4 mana to get rid of a nasty permanent on the field. Don't be so lightly with the 1 mana variant of this card. Of course, you can do it if it's necessary, but keep it for the bigger problems. Dawnbringer Cleric is very modular, and this helps the deck a lot. If you don't need to destroy a target enchantment, you get a life gain trigger off of this thing entering the battlefield, and you get a life gain trigger off of its own effect, which really helps with the Marauding Blight Priest in draining the opponent. Infernal Grasp, not much to say. Best removal spell in black at 2 mana. Losing 2 life is not that much of a deal, except for when playing against aggressive decks like Goblins or Mono White on the draw. Like, this is really, those 2 decks are really a problem for this slow, grindy deck. Yeah, 13 white sources, 15 black sources, 13 white for the 1 white mana that the deck needs, and 15 black sources for the double black in this card, and or playing 2 black spells in 1 turn, because that's, the black cards are less, but they're more powerful, I would say, and that's why 15 black sources. So yeah, that's pretty much it. I'll be showing you a few examples of how this deck can work, maybe what to look for while playing it. And because this deck is made for kitchen table magic and not for competitive play, I won't be showing any losses. That's just wasting my time and yours too. And disclaimer, please do not build this deck expecting you're gonna do well with it. This is a kind of artisan deck you'd rather just try out because you have the cards. This deck is underperforming for me, and I want it to be absolutely clear. This is on par with my white-blue party deck, which is also a tempo deck that is really variant dependent, like really dependent on what you draw, and so is this card. This is even, I'd say, even worse than that. So if you want to try it out, if you're curious, be my guest, play this deck, but really don't waste your precious wild cards on this deck. Please. Okay. Yeah. Thanks for sticking around. Games are coming up right now. And stay tuned if you want to see more. So, yeah. See you then. Here we go. Round number 1. I've pre-recorded this one. And I'll be doing this because this is actually better for me than for recording while playing the game. I'm just not a good commentator, and therefore I'd like to rewatch whatever I got. So I started out with this hand because it was slow enough but had removal in case I've needed it, and I wanted to know what I was playing against. And I was also on the draw, so that's why I chose to play the slow game. Not much to say. Good turn 2, good turn 3 with the Malakir as a land. Opponent stuck on black lands, which was fine by me. So I just wanted to get rid of both creatures because he was stuck on 1 black mana. So I wanted to use the time, use my resources, get something going, and just see what happens. There was no actual idea behind my play, just or except for getting rid of all those creatures in order to get some pressure on. And my opponent being stuck on 3 mana for 2 turns now is actually working very well in this favor. In our favor. And that's a creature I don't like in this deck. That thing has Death Touch. And the priest is removal, as you just saw. Now we're flooding a bit, but that's okay because we have a Cleric class, which is fine. So that's what I also go for. And I just chill out because Fellstinger has Death Touch. And then we have another priest. So now it was my goal to get the Cleric's life bond bigger than the amount of lands my opponent has. So that's what I went for. I wanted my creatures to have 5 toughness this turn. I mean 6 toughness. So that if he plays a land, he wouldn't be able to remove my important creatures. I needed the Cleric and I needed the Core Celebrant. The Dawnbringer Cleric was not important right now. I was wondering if I should give my opponent the opportunity to use his priest on the Lunar Veteran, but I opted not to. There's like 50-50 reason to do so or to do not. So there's no real meaning behind that. So yeah. More life, more counters. Bringing my creatures up to 7. Am I? No. To 6. Because I now play it? Yeah. It's a Spirit Cleric, so I'm putting my creatures up to 7 now. Yeah, so I was right. And now with the proper defense, I was then hoping for the Luminous Phantom to fly over. Now the best option would be to block with the Dawnbringer Cleric without counters, so that the Cleric goes to the grave and bring it back with the Cleric class. But my opponent did that for me already, so yeah, worked out. So now I started bumping up the Phantom. Still flooding, but that's how it is. So we use the mana as wise as possible to get the Luminous Phantom bigger and bigger and bigger. Because every life gain equals 1 counter, and that's what I went for. Pretty straightforward, nothing special. Just smack in the air until dead. And as you see, we are at 56 life. So we wouldn't even have issues if the opponent would attack. I was also worried about removal, because 3 cards are enough, but yeah, not much to fear. Another blocker. And then something funny happened. I really like the Shadow Sage. That's Xaxes. 6 Clerics means 6 life. There you go. Shadow Sage coming in for the rescue. So that's the pure power of Shadow Sage right there for you. So that's why this is game number 1. I wanted to, yeah, just show off the Shadow Sage right now. On to game 2. Here we are, game number 2. Yeah, let's just head right on into it. I wasn't sure what I was playing against, and since my opponent went first, I kept it, and I wanted to see what was going to happen. So based on seeing black-blue, I played my Cleric because I wasn't really sure, or I was hoping that they wouldn't have enchantment removal. And seeing green was like, okay, now I'm curious. I had no idea what was coming. It was pretty much like play the professor, get a flyer, yeah, and see what happens. Creature replacing itself with another creature was fine by me, so if he had removal, that was 1+ for me. And yeah, opponent was just doing nothing for 4 turns. I mean, this is his turn 4. And I was starting to assume that opponent was going to start playing big creatures or big spells. But I still had absolutely no clue what I was expecting, so I just opted to level up the Cleric class and give the initiative back to my opponent, because I really wanted to know what I was up against before I play out my rather underwhelming uncommons and commons, just to give me a little edge if that was worth anything. Because this deck is slow. We don't need speed. So yeah, my suspicions were correct. Opponent was playing big mana. And I think I opted for tapping out here. Or playing the Dawnbringer and keeping black open for the Malak here. And since attacking was not profitable, even with the counters, I opted to put everything on the Cleric to maybe incentivize my opponent to remove the Cleric. So if that would happen, I would still have the Rebirth open. Taking 5 damage in the air wouldn't be a big deal. We're a life gain after all. A life gain deck after all. I was also getting nervous for Meathook Massacre. But then opponent played Xanathar. And Xanathar's strength is actually using the opponent's deck against him. So my initial thought was, okay, removal. If opponent has something against it, that's fine. So be it. But I was pretty lucky. Opponent had a Fading Hope. So I said, okay, full swing. Life is not an issue. We're already back over 20 after the initial attack, so who cares? Attack. And that was half of opponent's starting life total. That was 10 damage. So I was pretty happy about that. Now, having the Skemfire in my hand, that was the next plan. Really didn't matter what I was going to draw. Losing that Cleric was also not too big of a deal in my eyes, because with opponent's mana open, I was just like, didn't know what to expect. So yeah. So yeah, I think I played the saddle. Yeah, I played it for 4, maybe for 3. And my idea was to drain him and attack. And I think I made a mistake right here. The counter should have been put on Lunark. Just, let me pause here. I should have put that counter on the Lunar Veteran to make it a 2/2, because opponent was on 4. He couldn't block all creatures and survive if I would have put it on the Lunar Veteran. So take this as a lesson for yourself. Please, please be careful with which creatures you put on a counter. This is just a blatant mistake, and you'll see why in a second. This is a perfect example of how not to use your resources on my part, because the 2 unknown cards could have been removal, could have been a bounce spell, could have been a counter spell, and if I would have put the counter on the Lunark, the game would have been over right now. So now I was afraid of Meathook Massacre, because that's a blight of my existence right now, especially with these Artisan decks. And yeah, I was fingers crossing that no board wipe would happen, because a board wipe would be pretty much game over for us. So it was all dependent on the next 3 cards. And if I remember well, he plays out a creature, and then I attack, or he gives up. Not sure. Yeah. Deep in the tank. Not sure if thinking or frustrated, but tank nonetheless. So, okay. Yeah, this is the whole reason I wanted to showcase this specific match. I think my opponent plays like the same card 3 times or 2 times, and then he plays 2 of my creatures. So yeah, he plays the Insight 3 times, and then he plays 2 of my creatures, and even that he plays wrong, as I remember. No, he doesn't. Doesn't matter. They're both Clerics. So yeah, all I needed now was to play the Inkling, get a life gain trigger off of Lunar Veteran in order to put the counter on the Veteran, and therefore we were in the same exact spot as before. And I've learned my lesson this time around. So I actually had the second opportunity to do the right thing instead of making the second mistake, or the same mistake the second time around. So, yeah. And then I got the win. I think he explodes now. No, he doesn't. Okay. So yeah, this game I wanted to show because putting your counters on the creature are crucial. Don't take it lightheartedly as I did. I got super lucky that my Sultai opponent didn't have any board wipes. And yeah, the second thing I wanted to mention here in this matchup was that my opponent played the Insight 3 times, and using an Insight and a Xanathar is actually suboptimal because my deck is just underpowered. So I didn't really have to be bothered about the synergy or the individual card strength of my deck to be afraid of Insight. Yes, it's a rare case, but worked out in the end for me. So yeah, on to game 3. Welcome to round 3. This game is going to be a rather weird one because my opponent played bad, I played bad, I got salty as hell, And in the end, it's actually still worked out for me. So yeah. Um, Nothing special for the start here. I just had a 1-drop, 2-drop as the deck actually wants. But for the fact that my opponent played a removal spell on my Luminous Phantom was the incentive for me to play the Luminous Phantom from the graveyard, which would equal to card advantage on my part. So that's what I did. If my opponent wouldn't have played removal, I would have played the Cleric, obviously. But it turned out the other way around. So yeah, that was okay by me. The Moss Pit Skeleton was or is a creature I wanted to build around, so I might have been lucky to find a deck to base the next video upon, but wouldn't happen. I was getting a bit uneasy because my opponent was like on the 3rd removal spell right now, or the 2nd or 3rd. So I was expecting removal.deck. So I kept on bashing, kept on attacking, kept on gaining life. So yeah, as I thought, removal.deck. Flooding wasn't helping me either, so I was getting a bit pissed, to say the least. And this is the reason I wanted to pause this, because this video is playing real fast. This is the exact reason why I like Dawnbringer Cleric, the white creature in my hand, as a removal spell. Don't play the Cleric if you don't have to and don't have targets. The 2 life you gain off of it is really not relevant in this deck, so keep it around for a turn or 2 longer if you can, and get rid of stupid cards like that one up there. I block, checked if it didn't have Death Touch. Played the Veteran first for life gain, Dawnbringer for removal, hoping my opponent will finally run out of gas. Down to 8. Trying to keep my cool somehow. And that was kind of my, oh god, this is over moment. But opponent, no hand cards, removing the token. More lands for me, so I was getting... This is the point where I was really getting salty. And I think he actually goes for board wipe right now. Yeah. let me slow this down because I have a lot to say. Playback speed on normal. So let's keep going. And I think yeah, I was really close to scooping like twice, I think. Yep, there's number 2. Then okay, maybe I'm lucky. The opponent's board state is not that good. I can get back my Lunark. My opponent just lost a few cards. I was okay. I was like on the verge. Still on the verge. So I played my flyer, thinking about drawing cards, but then I remembered my own lesson. Don't just draw. Use it as a sacrifice outlet. Maybe my opponent also draws into land, so that was okay for me. And I think my opponent made a big mistake here. But I don't remember. I just remember him making a mistake. I think he didn't activate Ren and 7, even though he actually looked at it with his mouse. I think. Or that was my... So yeah, getting salty again. Drawing that land. I'm like at 8 lands now. I think my opponent also drew land. Yeah. And then he actually forgot to activate Ren and 7 for real this time. Like he attacked and then he passed. And that was like the reason for me to go on. No, that was next turn maybe. Yeah, it was next turn. So okay. This time around he lost 3 good cards. like really good cards. So that was the reason I kept going. I attacked Ren again because I really wanted that thing off the field. Didn't want him to get enough loyalty. And this is probably the turn where opponent forgot to activate Ren. Attack didn't matter. Yeah, an opponent just forgot to activate Ren, so I actually get a free Planeswalker kill. So things were looking up again for me. It's like, okay, life gain was fine. Opponent wasn't going to do much with the treasure. I'm still at the healthy life total. The third Blight Priest, but no life gain. Yep, that was a question mark in my head. And luckily, opponent was flooding. Still healthy life total, no blocks. I really wanted to capitalize on 3 Blight Priests. Like, this was the only game I had 3 out. And then I found the Cleric, which was amazing. This one synergizes well off of Village Rites, because Luminous Phantom actually triggers off of death. So if I would sacrifice my Cleric, I would get a life trigger, and therefore I would drain my opponent for 3. So that was the idea. But then, like I said in the beginning, I made mistakes in this game too. You'll see in a moment that each creature gets trample. So that was a cool top deck for my opponent. He actually had enough mana to give everything +1/+1 counter. And I simply forgot that everything was trampling, even though the animation is on, right? So 2, 4, 6, 8, 11. So I thought, okay, block 3, that's down to 8, I'd be fine. So I sacked it. And I was super lucky. I was unbelievably lucky that I survived by 1 life. So yeah, gain a life, drain my opponent for 3, and then a smack in the air. And that's how I win. Yeah, not nothing tournament play wise to share here. I just wanted to show this video just to show you guys that I also get pissed as hell from certain game patterns. Just because I show only winning games, I do lose a lot while finding or searching for good footage to play. So yeah, I wanted to show you guys that I also struggle with these kind of videos. And I wanted to show this video for Marauding Blight Priest as well, just to have 3. Because it went by fast, but sacrificing the Cleric after blocks was the intention to block 3 power. But just as I said in the deck tech, use it wisely. Don't just sack and draw for nothing. Because if I didn't have a blocker, I wouldn't have had enough Marauding Blight Priests. So yeah, take that from this movie, from this clip. So yeah, if you've stuck with me this far, thank you very much for watching the videos. I'll be showing some silent other games, like real quick games, like 1 minute 50 and 3 minute 30 games of cool interactions of this deck. I actually was able to record more than I wanted, but the games were so quick and over I couldn't use them for commentary. But if you're interested, stick around for another 5 to 10 minutes. And if you don't stick around, that's also fine. Thank you for watching. Take care. See you in the next video.